Oh, hello Internet. Let's look at another part of the book of Master Mo. The next section is called Moderation in Funerals. And in fact, at this time, only the third version of this chapter still exists. Moderation in Funerals 3 is quite long. I don't know how long the earlier chapters were that are now lost. And we've also seen this alluded to in the previous section. A lot of what is said here does kind of follow on from the earlier chapter on moderation in use. So I'm actually not going to read the whole of this chapter, but selected parts of it. And as we've seen, Mo can be repetitive. Up until now, I have read through most of the repetitive nature just because of the literary quality of the book and how I think this restating of things is actually part of the philosophical project, the idea of reinforcing it. Like I say, it may have come from an earlier oral tradition where reinforcement was the way that things were remembered, but that is in fact what we see in the ancient philosophers, the transition from an earlier oral tribal tradition to a newer historical and, dare I say, more modern tradition, without wishing to be judgmental in the use of the word modern compared to traditional. So, chapter 25, Moderation in Funerals 3. Master Mo spoke, saying, "A man who is Ren in planning for the world is in no way different from a filial son in planning for his parents. Now, what will a filial son do in planning for his parents? I say, if his parents are poor, he devotes himself to making them rich. If the people of his family are few, he devotes himself to making them many. If they are many but in disorder, he devotes himself to creating order for them. When he has done these things, even if his strength is insufficient, or his materials not enough, or his wisdom is inadequate, he has done what he can. He would not dare to leave any strength unspent, or scheme to hoard or cast away beneficial resources and not use them for his parents. It is by discharging these three responsibilities that the filial son makes provision for his parents." And then Mo spends the rest of 25.1 saying exactly the same thing in regards to a man of Ren preparing for the world. So 25.2. "Now, when we come to the present time, the sage kings of the three dynasties of former times are dead, and the world is bereft of Yi. Among noble men of later generations, some take elaborate funerals and prolonged mourning to be Ren and Yi, and to be the duty of the filial son, whereas others take lavish funerals and prolonged mourning to be contrary to Ren and Yi, and not to be the duty of a filial son. I say these two groups contradict each other in their words and are opposed to each other in their actions. They both say, 'We are upholding and abiding by the way of Yao, Shun, Yu, Tang, Wen, and Wu,' but they contradict each other in their words and are opposed to each other in their actions. And because of this, the noble men of later generations are all in doubt and confusion regarding the two positions." So 25.3 is simply a long-winded way of asking the question. It's literally as long as everything I've just read and asks, how do we solve the problem? So I'm going to skip straight to 25.4. "Moreover, by promoting the world's benefits and eliminating its harms, there never has been, from ancient times to the present, a failure to bring order to the states and their people. How do we know this to be so? Nowadays, among the world's officers and noble men, there are still many who are doubtful and uncertain as to whether elaborate funerals and prolonged mourning are in accord with what is right or not, whether they are beneficial or harmful. Therefore, Master Mo spoke, saying, 'In this case, then, let us for a moment try to examine the matter in the light of those who now uphold the idea of elaborate funerals and prolonged mourning, taking them to be a service to the state.'" So now Mo will go through all of the things that an elaborate mourning procedure actually requires. The rest of 25.4 talks about all the different accoutrements of an elaborate funeral that are required. I'm going to skip to 25.5 when he talks about, 25.5. "What will be the procedure for those in mourning? It is said that mourners should wail and cry, make a sobbing sound at regular intervals, and wear sackcloth and hemp stained with tears. They should live in a mourning hut with a straw mat for a bed and a clod of earth for a pillow. They should also restrain each other from eating so as to appear starving, and they should wear thin clothes so as to be cold. They should make their appearance gaunt and wasted, and their countenance sallow and dark. Their ears and eyes should not hear or see, and their hands or feet should be without strength, as if they cannot be used. It is also said in respect to the conduct of mourning by high officers that they must have the support and be able to rise with a stick and be able to walk, and must carry out their duties like this for 3 years. If their statements are taken as the standard, and their actions in accord with the words that kings, dukes, and great officers act like this, they will certainly not be able to come to court early and retire late, to carry out trials and bring order to government. If officers and high officers act like this, they will certainly not be able to bring order to the 5 offices and the 6 departments, to develop grasslands and woods, and to fill the public granaries. If farmers act like this, they will certainly not be able to go out early and come back late, to plough and plant and cultivate the trees. If the 100 artisans act like this, they will certainly not be able to repair boats and carriages, to make utensils and vessels. If women act like this, they will certainly not be able to get up early and go to bed late and carry out their spinning and weaving. In considering elaborate funerals, there is the burial of much wealth. In considering prolonged mourning, there is the prolonged hindrance to the conduct of affairs. Materials already produced are buried, and there is prolonged hindrance to further production. To seek wealth in this way is like preventing ploughing, but seeking to reap. As a method of bringing about wealth, it cannot work. Therefore, to attempt to enrich the state like this is to attempt the impossible. So what Mo is saying here is clearly correct. When somebody dies, whether it be somebody in your family or the ruler of the state, if you expend a huge amount of resources on their funeral, those resources are lost to those still alive. And if those who are mourning are forced to mourn for very long periods of time and to do these very strange and self-destructive mourning practices, then they will be hindered from producing other things for the state, and so the state will be stunted. For my part, these very curious mourning practices seem to be a kind of embryonic form of the Asian idea of face, that the thing that you present to the world is simply something that saves your face, a certain demonstration of propriety, whether or not it be something that you genuinely feel. Once again, I think we can make connection to the modern phenomenon of political populism, where those who are in charge of the state or who are supporting the rulers of the state claim that these things need to be done in order for the state to be worthy. But anyone who looks at this with a clear head can immediately see that what is being done is counterproductive. The next few sections are simply ways of highlighting these facts. 25.6 begins, if the wish is to increase the number of people, is this perhaps possible? No. Again, their theories make it impossible. 25.7 begins, if the wish is to bring order to government, is this perhaps possible? No. Again, their theories make it impossible. Remember, these are the theories who actually advocate for elaborate funeral practices. 25.8, if the wish is to prevent large states attacking small states, is this perhaps possible? No. Again, their theories make it impossible. And just to add a little bit further down in 25.8, it says, now, in general, the reason why large states do not attack small states, it is because the latter have a large store of resources, have inner and outer city walls in good repair, and have superiors and subordinates who are in accord. So, essentially, small states survive the predations of large states by being well prepared for possible attacks, remembering that at this time in the ancient world, if you had a strong supply of stores and weapons and other things for defense, you could, in defending your territory, see off far superior forces attacking simply by the way that warfare was done at that time. 25.9. If the wish is to gain the blessings of the Supreme Lord and ghosts and spirits, is it perhaps possible? No. Again, their theories make it impossible. So we come to 25.10. Therefore, the ancient sage kings formulated rules for carrying out funerals and burials, which said the coffin should be 3 kun thick, sufficient for a decaying body. The burial garments should be 3 ling, layers, sufficient to encase the corpse. In carrying out the burial, the coffin should not reach water below, and the stench should not leak through above. The burial mound should approximate to 3 chi and no more. Once the one who has died is buried, those who are living must not mourn for long, but quickly return to their daily affairs, each doing what they are capable of in pursuit of mutual benefit. These were the rules of the sage kings. So 25.11. Now, the arguments of those who advocate elaborate funerals and prolonged mourning say, with regard to elaborate funerals and prolonged mourning, although they cannot enrich the poor or make the few many, although they cannot settle danger or bring order to disorder, they are nevertheless the way of the sage kings. Master Mo said, not so. In former times, when Yao went north to reach the 8 Dai tribes, he died on the road and was buried on the northern side of Mount Cheong. His burial garments were made of 3 layers, and he had a plain wooden coffin tied up with vines. Only after the coffin was lowered into the ground was there weeping, and the hole was just filled without a burial mound. After the burial, oxen and horses crossed the grave. There are other examples of ancient sage kings dying to demonstrate that despite what those who advocate for elaborate funerals say, the sage kings did not believe in such things, as he actually said in the previous section. I particularly like that last line, after the burial, oxen and horses crossed the grave. Many times you, in more ceremonial cultures in Asia, find that it is considered disrespectful or in some way dirty for that which is below the feet or the beasts of burden to cross over, to pass over that which is above, such as the higher parts of the body or the superior creatures. But here, when Yao went north and died on the road, oxen and horses crossed over his grave. A fine display of the humility of the sage kings and a denial of those who suggest that the way of the sage kings was these elaborate funeral practices. So next, 25.12 is a summary of how elaborate funerals are done in Mo's time. And then there's a summary in 25.13. Because of this, although they, the people advocating these elaborate funerals, seek to enrich the state, they greatly impoverish it. Although they seek to make the people many, they greatly reduce them in number. And although they seek to bring order to the administration, they bring extreme disorder to it. They seek to prevent the attacks of large states on small states, but they find in the end that this is impossible. They seek to obtain good fortune from the Supreme Lord and ghosts and spirits, but they get only misfortune. And then he completes that section by comparing this to the ways of the sage kings. 25.14 says, now the arguments of those who adhere to elaborate funerals and prolonged mourning say, if elaborate funerals and prolonged mourning are really not the way of sage kings, how do you account for the fact that noble men of the central states practice them and don't stop them, implement them and don't abandon them? Master Mo said, this is what is called considering one's habits convenient and one's customs yi. Formerly, to the east of Yue there was the country of Kaimu. When an eldest son was born, they cut him up and ate him. They called this fitting for the younger brother. When the paternal grandfather died, they carried the maternal grandmother away and abandoned her, saying, we cannot live with the wife of a ghost. If, above, these things are taken to be government practice, and below they are taken to be customs, and are carried out and not stopped, implemented and not discarded, then how could this be the way of true Ren and Yi? This is what is called considering one's habits convenient and one's customs Yi. So there, Mo is, in the last two sections actually I'll go over, in 2513 he does credit those practicing funeral rites with wanting to enhance the state, with wanting to grow the population. He just says that they are simply going the wrong way about it entirely. And then in 2514, when they ask why then have these principles not been stopped if they were truly not the way of the sage kings, what Mo is essentially referring to is momentum in customs. The idea that over time, whatever your customs are, you will come to justify them. You will come to regard them as Yi simply by virtue of the fact that they are your customs. And he refers to this tribe out beyond the states of the then early Chinese area, where they had these, to our ears, ridiculous customs of cutting up and eating the firstborn son, of abandoning an old woman when her husband died, and saying that, look, they would have considered these practices to be Ren and Yi as well. But if we are taking a clear-headed view on what benefits the state, what marshals greater resources, what grows the population, which is the greatest resource of the state of all, then clearly those customs cannot be regarded Ren and Yi, and the customs of elaborate funerals also cannot be regarded as Ren and Yi. 25.15 is further examples, and then 25.16 simply restates the burial customs, the coffin, and the thick layers of garments, etc. Finally then, 25.17. Therefore, Master Mo spoke, saying, nowadays the officers and noble men of the world, if they sincerely wish in their hearts to be Ren and Yi, and seek to be superior officers who desire to be accord with the way of the sage kings above, and to be in accord with the benefit of the ordinary people of the state below, it is right that they practice moderation in funerals in their conduct of government. This is something they cannot fail to examine. And that kind of alludes to the broader applicability of this section. Moderation in funerals is only one example, and in the time of Mo, it is one particularly should we say, egregious example. It would be, at least to Mo, and I would, if I were there, probably to me too, so blindingly obvious that these elaborate funerals are hugely wasteful and unnecessary. The resources squandered, the damage done to the people and the population. But this idea of momentum in governance is something that Mo is kind of skimming around, but which is key here. The same can be said for all kinds of bureaucratic inefficiency and incompetence. And over time, all of these things will come to grow in any state which does not constantly re-examine its principles and seek to reduce the functioning of the state to its most basic, efficient level. I'm kind of agreeing with the likes of the libertarians here, but please believe me when I say that no, the state will continue to grow over time. There will always be a need for that expanding bureaucracy to serve the needs of the expanding bureaucracy. But serving the needs of the bureaucracy is not the same as serving the needs of the bureaucrats. And that is the failure of every government system throughout history. At a certain point, the system gets gamed and the bureaucrats come to associate their own benefit with the benefit of the state. They stop looking clearly and trying to increase efficiencies for the benefit of the greater mass of people below. They stop wanting to benefit the population and they start wishing to benefit themselves. This is the real point of moderation in funerals. So anyway, that is my perspective on this chapter of the book of Master Mo. Please let me know what you think down below. If you're familiar with the book of Mo, then I'd love to hear what you think. But even if not, please send your opinions to me. I'd love to see them. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.